I'm going to be talking about the institutionalization of disability from 1865 to 1890. This was a time right after the Civil War, and the Civil War redefined lives and forced a rethinking of disability in the U.S. during this time. The emancipation meant new experiences of disability for African Americans. Also, war and its consequences generated new adaptive devices and medical advances, such as the wheelchair in 1869 and improved prosthetics. This improved the lives of many disabled veterans. This was also a time where the disabled started to form a place in the community. Some disabled veterans were able to find employment after the war, and some were not. Many disabled veterans found that recreating an economic and social life with a newly disabled body could be very difficult. Other veterans achieved great success, such as labor based on intellectual work as opposed to physical work. President Lincoln established the Invalid Corps, which was designed to release able-bodied men for fighting while using disabled veterans for other labor that they could perform. This sparked much violence among disabled veterans. The Invalid Corps was frequently ridiculed as cowardly slackers who habitually tried to avoid service, and in general, people with disabilities were looked at suspiciously on the streets. Black veterans had less of a chance being awarded pensions than white veterans because of racism and hostility on the part of claims agents approving their pensions. Psychological distress, such as PTSD and TBIs, carried stigma for veterans and families, which undermined their status in society. Doctors called disabled veterans with psychological distress as delusional. Some veterans even created their own adaptive devices if doctors disapproved of their symptoms. This was also a time where the definition of a disability became more gendered, race, and class-based. Women could not receive disability service pensions as non-combatants. White women were considered incapable of performing labor if they were within the upper or the middle class. White women of low class engaged in rigorous labor. People defined disability as the incapacity to perform manual labor. Wartime made some disability heroic, but only for male veterans with physical disability. A number of institutions for disabled individuals expanded from the 1860s to the 1920s. The adoption of the ugly laws in San Francisco, Chicago, and other major cities. And the ugly laws were when they banned any person who was diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an ugly or disgusting object from public places and streets. Deserving disabled were considered those with money, and undeserving disabled were considered those without money. Segregated asylums developed quickly after the Civil War, where a number of states segregated their patients. Medical professionals, like doctors, made racist claims about mental and physical deficiencies of Blacks, and they also responded differently to them and malnourished them. The use of sign language made deaf people outsiders, and the stigmatization of deafness increased, as did the rise of deaf education. Social attitudes and power dynamics influenced definitions of insanity and behavior. Women and men were segregated in schools, and men characterized women as freaks. The turn of the century showed over 130 residential schools open for people with disabilities, deafness, and blindness. Although disabilities became a little bit more accepted and institutionalized in specific areas during this time, there's still a very long ways to go.